Church history. So, Eric, I watched a little bit of the footage from last week. What was most helpful about Dr. Sorum's class? Was there anything that stood out? He's a philosopher, but he's good at history. With philosophy, of course, comes Christian ethics. So, anything in particular that you have questions about anything that he stated?
Well, I think the three things he really emphasized were the three ways of, I guess, obtaining truth, or seeing truth: subjectivism, relativism, and objectivism.
Objectivism.
And then he went over them and the differences.
And we know when it comes to subjectivism, relativism, and objectivism, that is not just a question of epistemology, but also ethics, right? There's epistemologies. What is that? Do we know what that is? In theology, in philosophy, we talked about that. It's how we know what we know, right? It's a branch of philosophy that concerns how we know what we know. But as far as church history, I don't want to get into the philosophical aspects of the other class, but anything in particular that stood out? No? Okay. Overall, it was great, I hope.
Yeah.
We did a swap. Now I got a cover for him at Azusa.
Oh.
Which will be fun. And it's two of us that are covering. One is an Orthodox priest exorcist, and then myself. Oh, I think I'm going to drive up there and sit in when he's lecturing, because that aesthetic exorcism, I'd like to know what his take is.
He did give the whole.
Huh?
Well, he gave the whole timeline, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, on the board here.
Yeah, on the board. I thought that was very interesting.
Good. Puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. When the church became, sort of legal.
The Edict of Milan.
Yeah, the Edict of Milan.
Very good.
He highlighted that.
Okay.
The Justin Martyr liturgy, and it was just very interesting to see.
Good. So we're going to go rather fast then. Well, we kind of do that all the time, but let's try to go a little faster.
He ended on the Great Schism, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll kind of end on that today as well. Did you guys go through the Nicene Creed or any of those? You guys read them?
Well, he recited it for us.
Okay. And you guys talked about the hypostatic union. Got into that?
Yeah.
Diophysis?
Did he go through that?
Huh?
He is the
I
very
don't
really-
think so.
Okay. So, where did we leave off before last week? We talked about Gnostic heresies are spreading between the first 100 years up to about 250 AD. Various church leaders, including Justin Martyr, Theophilus of Antioch. Yeah, I think we mentioned that one. I said it was not the Theophilus in the book of Luke. Remember that? And then I think we moved on to, I mentioned the theologian Clement of Alexandria, which is in Egypt. He dies in 215 AD. Do we recall that? Yes? In 220, Origen, the Alexandrian philosopher and theologian, founded the school in Caesarea. Do you recall that? He writes what's called the Hexapla, which is the Old Testament in 6 Hebrew and Greek texts. The Hexapla. You can Google that if you want more sources. Maybe Shelley talks about that in the book. Hexapla, and that is on slide 38. You guys look bewildered, so I don't think I shared that slide. Okay, so I'm going to move up a little bit. We'll get to that slide in a minute. Okay, let's just go through. It was, no, this we talked about. Yeah, between the wall of England and Scotland. Remember that? Hadrian, we mentioned him. Between 117 and 138, and then Trajan ruled 98 through 117. Roman Empire reaches greatest geographical extent, spreading through Mesopotamia, Arabia, and the Balkans. Where's the Balkans?
It's, what should we call it? The Balkans? Yeah, it's all Eastern Europe, right? Yugoslavia.
Nastrobi, Živio. Imad. Then in 150 and 159 AD, the final diaspora took place of the Jews. World history note, 150, the earliest known Sanskrit is found in India. Yeah, I think we left off on that one. That sounds familiar to me. me. Can you guys read it like this? Is that alright for you? Or do we have to blow it up? We'll try it.
I can see it. Can you see it? All right.
How's that? Is that better for you?
Perfect.
Oh, that's a lot better.
Alright. So, continuing. Martyrs, apologists, and heretics. Remember the big thing about heretics that's different in the early part of the church from heretics today is the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Scientology and all of these various cults, including Baha'i breaking off from, say, Islam. Those cultists don't have a leg to stand on today, other than false prophecies and polygamy or rewriting the New Testament, New World Translation, as the JWs, Jehovah's Witnesses, would do. See, in the early part of the church, if you sat around and debated whether Christ had, after the incarnation of Jesus, was it during the incarnation we have 100% God, right? 100% man. Well, did he keep his two natures, or were the two fused into one? We can debate that all day long. So, one would say, well, maybe you're a heretic. Well, I would say you are, and so forth. Well, that's why we got the councils together, to figure out theological truths, but they weren't dreamt up. They were pulled from the scriptures. So to theologize, philosophize about these things is nothing new. So when you have now 2,000 years of church history, who is, Charles Taze Russell or Joe Smith running around in New York City claiming he has the truth? Don't join the church. Don't join any of the churches because they're all corrupt. So it's either good old Joseph Smith versus Christ. Christ says what? The gates of hell will never prevail against my church. So the heretics back in those days are a little different than today. I'm not talking about Sabellianism and Arianism and so forth, but even them, now looking back, we can cut them a little bit of slack. But ultimately, the early heretics forced us to the drawing board to really codify not what theologians just dreamt up, pulling from the scriptures, making a sound case for it. So the difference between old school heretics and the new school heretics. Big difference. So right now, as Gnostic, and when you say Gnosticism, you never pronounce the G, from the Greek word gnosis, agnostic, you put an A in front of gnosis, you get without or no knowledge. Atheos, the A, theos, atheism, without God, or Godism, no Godism. So Gnostic, you never say Gnosticism, say Gnostic. Gnostic heresies are spreading between 100 and 250 AD. Various church leaders, like I mentioned, Justin Martyr, Maltetus, Theophilus of Antioch, Irenaeus, Hippolytus, and Tertullian were, of course, battling these guys in writing. Same thing Walter Martin and the apologists do today. And by the way, say a prayer for Gretchen Pasantino's family. She just passed away a couple of days ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Loved her.
Yeah.
Loved Bob. Bob died a few years back. But Gretchen, just a heart attack, died 2 days later in the hospital.
Oh,
And you heard about Pastor Steve Mays in Southgate.
yeah.
Back surgery, and then dies. Same day as Gretchen died.
Wow.
So, just goes to show that, sometimes I think I'm untouchable, nothing's going to happen to me, But, when it's your time, it's your time. God takes you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, is martyred 107. Marcion is excommunicated. Who is Marcion? From your readings. Do we have something we call the Marcion Bible? Right? So we're talking early now, right? We're talking mid-1st century, 140, 150 AD, right? We already have a Bible by a heretic who collected these letters. And if you're into New Testament manuscripts and so forth, you want to get familiar definitely with Ryland's papyri, John Ryland's papyri, and the Chester Beatty papyri. Beatty is spelled B-E-A-T-T-Y. In my second book, not the pluralism one, the Jesus book, Is He the Messiah of Israel? There's actually 2 pictures. I know some of you have it already,
Yeah.
of John Rylands and Chester Beatty. If not, you Google it. Those are very, very important manuscripts because one was found in Egypt, and the fact that it was found in Egypt back in those days just sort of suggests that New Testament fragments would travel, in various places throughout the Middle East. You're not just going to have one traveling to Egypt, one going, further east, and so on. But why am I making that connection? Because Marcion had enough to collect various letters that were floating around. He says, I reject the Old Testament, remember? I only accept these books before there was a New Testament, but we say that it was completed. All the books were completed before the close of the 1st century, like 96 AD with Revelation, if you go with the late date like I do. If you want to be an amillennialist, well, you have to date Book of Revelation before AD 70 to say that stuff, most of it occurred. And that's the difference. Or one of the main differences. So he's excommunicated for heresy by the Church of Rome. He taught that there's no connection again between the Old and New Testament, and the God of the Jews, the God of the Gentiles, or Christians, or even Jewish Christians. Between 132 and 135, the second Jewish rebellion occurs, and Jerusalem is destroyed again. So first AD 70, now you got it again, 132, 135. Between 100 and 200 AD, the Didache of the Apostles' Creed is written. You should Google Didache, find a good source, not Wikipedia, some Bible scholastic type of site, and read up on that. And you know what? A good site is really called, is a Catholic site, just loaded with history, called the Advent. The Advent is a great source if you just need information off of your phone, something. Hexapla, what's that all about? Go to theadvent.com. It's a Catholic site, and you want a quick rundown, say, on Augustine or Aquinas, a little heavier than what you have in your textbook and what we're covering here in about 8-9 weeks. Great source. Let's see here. Then you have, in 155, Justin Martyr writes his first apologetic, right, against something. In the same year, 155, Polycarp, Bishop of Smyrna. We've heard of Smyrna. What book of the Bible is Smyrna mentioned? Revelation. And we had at least 7 churches in the book of Revelation before there was a church in Rome. Amen? And again, Polycarp was a direct disciple of John, and Polycarp was burned at the stake. Following year, AD 156, Montanus of Phrygia leads a controversial renewal movement. The Montanists, or the New Prophecy, emphasize the gifts of the Spirit. You got the same type of movements. They come and go within the church. Today we're just going to talk about the gifts of the Spirit. We're going to find the gift of the Spirit, and not spirits, one Spirit. And we're going to sit around and discover them and pray and everything else. And as an early Christian, I'm not going to mention the pastor or where I was, but once a week there would be a pastor, and they would, speak in tongues and the gift of prophecy and all this stuff. I know you love that stuff, Me as a new believer, it freaked me out. I was like, man, everybody in this room is weird. I'm just looking around, and somebody over there would pray and say something. This was not in the middle of the Bible study. This was like worship and then a quiet time, and then it would be Bible study. Everybody said, you got to come to this church. You got to hear this guy. I was already going to the church, but I didn't attend that Bible study. And it freaked me out. Not because I do believe that the gifts are for today. I don't believe they died with the apostles. I don't. But having said that, it was just, nobody had explained thoroughly what it was all about. So to me, it was a circus. Speaking in tongues over there, then one person stands up and starts translating, speaking out, and so that you have the gift of knowledge, interpretation, and prophecy, etc., etc. Well, nowadays, when I read about the Montanists, it goes right back to that specific night of the week. I went twice and I was done. And you know what? Back in the day, Chuck Smith, he told me one time, he says, Nick, you should, if all the gifts are available, talking about Montanists, if all the gifts today are available, shouldn't you want them all? Yeah. You should, right?
That's right.
Because they're for whose benefit?
Church.
You and the church. But in my younger days, I was just, no, I just want the gift of knowledge, whatever that means. I don't want the gift of tongues. I don't want to interpret someone as speaking in tongues. This freaks me out. It's almost like, Lutheran, God's frozen chosen, I guess. I don't know.
But
But
why does he freak you out? What's so freaky about it?
that, I was a new believer, just, two
Who's-
years in it.
Who was leading folks?
I ain't saying. Anyway,
Odin Fong used to have that kind of thing.
well, there you go. In any event, in time they were condemned by the church authorities. Now they weren't stressing the type of gifts and healings that we're talking about today. It was gift ministry on steroids. Read about it in your book. The Roman theologian Hippolytus, here we got a Roman theologian, records in the apostolic tradition, which includes an early form of the Apostles' Creed. Again, read up on the Hexapla, Apostles' Creed, all these things that we don't have time to cover, unfortunately. This should be a 4-month course, just so you know. 3 hours for 4 months, and maybe then we'd be able to do it. Try to do the book of Genesis in 8 weeks. I did. I never seen so many slides, but it was crazy. Around 180, Irenaeus of Lyons writes against heresies. She lists 20 New Testament books as canonical. And we're going to talk about that later on today, like a brief summary. What happened in 200, 250, 300, 400 at various, looking at what Origen, what did he cite? What was his list of approved books? Because ultimately we have to bring this within a biblical New Testament context as well, all right? Sort of defending that. So he lists 20 New Testament books as canonical, which means officially accepted, recognized as authoritative. He also condemned Gnostic writings, including the Gospel of Judas. In 196, the Easter controversy. We mentioned this briefly already, I think. Remember the East and the West were going back and forth on which day we should celebrate Easter? All right? Now, Origen is the guy you want to pay attention to. The Alexandrian philosopher, again, he writes the Hexapla, Old Testament in 6 Hebrew and Greek texts. And you can read further. Do you have, I know you got Eusebius Church History, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you get Beatty's book too? Doctrine of the Early Church?
Oh, yeah. Kelly?
Kelly, yeah, this Kelly and what's the other one? I thought I recommended another one. He's got more reading because he's doing the MA. Lots of reading.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I just found word that the I guess fall module, the one that's coming up, they want me to teach world religions, and I love that subject. World religion's going to be fun. All right, so, but oh boy, I'm not hot. Did someone turn on the AC? It's got a lock on it. Aren't you a locksmith, Craig? Where's the former thief who repented?
You got a paper clip?
Oh, maybe like maybe open those doors there.
Oh.
Is that okay?
No, we better not.
Or air or something?
I know they-
It is, it's cooking in here. It's
Yeah.
not
It
just
is,
you.
it is hot.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry to you online, but we are really boiling in this room.
Where's Stan?
Southern California is hot. Yeah. All right, Origen was among the most prominent of the early patristics. Now, when we say patristics, what could that mean?
The
Church
poppies?
fathers.
Hmm?
The poppies?
The poppies? The papas, yeah. The
That follow the.
just like
father.
what would we call them in the Old Testament? The
Patriarchs.
patriarchs. Patristics in the New Testament, right? Or following the New Testament. But there are some of these words like bishop, right? Elder. You can actually trace those down etymologically into Greek. So, bishop, bischophoria, or whatever, stuff that you can look up. So when you're looking at the hierarchy in the church, there shouldn't be one. Well, Christ is the head of the church, so there's a hierarchy everywhere. In any event, he was one of the most prominent of the early church fathers. He was probably born, we're not sure, in Alexandria, Egypt, about 182, and died in Caesarea, and that's where he founded that school, wrote the Hexapla, no later than 251 CE, that's when he died, I should say AD. As a young man, he was given the best scholarly education possible through the efforts of his father. Very, very good stuff here. In 202, his father was martyred for his Christian faith, and Origen himself ideally wished to pursue by accompanying his father. He's like, you're going to kill my dad, kill me too. So they were a tight unit. He was spared because he was young, and his mother, of course, would intervene. You know, Origen sort of, think of Origen in the early part of the church, you know, mid-2nd century, and then think of Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas. They call him the doctor of the church. You know, prior to Aquinas, I don't know if I mentioned this already, many argue that philosophy was illegal in the church. There's a vain philosophy. Colossians, well, yeah, vain philosophy is something that we don't need to spend our time with. Now, if you like apologetics and you want to be a teacher, you need to read a little bit of vain philosophy so you can answer people who believe it, you know. But Aquinas was thrown into a monastery, I think at the age of 5, by his parents, and just, you know, ended up at University of Paris under Albert the Great, and Origen, sort of like, we got here 2nd, 3rd century, and then in the 12th century we got Aquinas. I'm not going to compare the two, both were brilliant, but it's hard to top Aquinas. Just get a summary of theology. If you don't have that set, Summa Theologica. Definitely one of the works that you should get into. All right, he spent his early life in Alexandria as an impoverished but highly respected teacher of the scriptures. So he wasn't a wealthy guy. Then he moved to what they call Palestine, right? Now this is on the other side of the resurrection. So that's where you have the verbiage Palestinius coming in. It was not so. There was no Palestine before the birth of Christ. Remember that? And if anyone is a Palestinian, it's the Jew. Because remember, one of the Roman officials says, you're not a Jew, you're not God's chosen. Palestinians. So there was no Palestinian people, that is Arab. If anything, it would be a slap in the face to the Jew. All right. So he moves over to Palestine, where he spent much of the remaining part of his life in teaching and producing huge writings. He's credited with 6,000 written editions, each consisting of a completed scroll. Pretty heavy. Throughout his life, Origen did extensive work on the Septuagint. What does that mean? Septuaginta. 70. All right, so 70 scholars were appointed, but it's really how many? 72. They just rounded it off to Septuaginta, right? 70 scholars were appointed to translate the scriptures, producing several variations of similar study. The most complete, however, was the Hexapla, there it is again, in which he compared the Septuagint with 3 parallel Greek translations of the Hebrew scriptures. It's sort of like buying the parallel study Bible, right? You have the King James, New King James, the NIV, the NASB, but imagine that in Hebrew and Greek and everything else. So, great tool for future theologians in his day. The work was organized in 6 volumes, and again, hex meaning 6, from hexapla. Between 235 and 270, Roman persecution under several emperors occur, yet Christianity grows and grows. 258, Cyprian is martyred after refusing to sacrifice to the Roman gods. Cyprian in 258. And then, we're moving on to the world scene. I said last time when we met, we're going to talk about silkworms. So what's going on in the rest of the world during this time? Well, around 200, silkworms arrive in China from Korea and then in Japan. 210, it's called the period of Neoplatonism. So we have Plato, right, in philosophy, which we'll cover later tonight. Then you have the Neoplatonists, right? You ever heard of Thomism? Mm-hmm. Have you heard of Neo-Thomism? There's always some offshoot off of the main. So, period of Neoplatonism, the last of the Greek philosophies. 215 was the formation of the Neo-Hebrew language. In 220, Goths. Who are they, Corey? Who are the Goths?
Goths.
Yeah, who invade Asia Minor, the Persian. Who are the other Goths?
Visigoths?
Huh?
The Visigoths?
There you go. So Goths, and of course you got the Goth in Hollywood, and dress all black. And then we have the Visigoths. Who are the Visigoths?
Are they Nordic tribes?
I'm getting close to my neck of the woods.
It's not a French? No. Scandinavian? No. Not Germans.
We'll get to that later. Goths, Visigoths, two different
I thought
people.
gods were French. We forgots.
We forgot. In the same year, Chinese Han dynasties ended, resulting in 4 centuries of division. 248, Rome celebrates its 1000th anniversary. Diophantus of Alexandria produces his first book in algebra in 250 AD. But look, gotta pay attention here. Don't we say that algebra came from the Muslim thinkers?
No. The Greeks.
Many say that, right? Not true. Yes, University of Baghdad was flourishing after Al-Ghazali and Al-Kindi and these Arabic Islamic mystics. Today, they would have been blown to pieces because they were really Islamic pantheists, and you can't be both. But setting that aside, University of Baghdad still around until ISIS get to it and blow it up, right? A lot of good thinkers, came out of that school. But just like I don't fully credit the Kalam cosmological argument to Al-Ghazali, we've got to go to John Philoponus, who's in the 2nd, 3rd century, roughly around that time. Same thing here. You've got Diophantus of Alexandria, Egypt, 250 AD, horsing around with algebra. 257, the Goths are divided into Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. The invasion of the Black Sea area begins. The Goths sack Athens and Sparta and Corinth.
Wow.
271, the Chinese developed the first form of what we call a compass. So, a lot of stuff going on the other side of the world, right? Having said that, what is Manichaeanism? We're going to get up to, we're going to talk about Augustine a little bit, and probably in our very last session of church history, we'll focus in on some of the main teachings of some of the main fathers. But for right now, before Augustine became a convert to Christianity, he was part of a movement, a religious cult known as Manichaeism. And in 242, originating in Persia, of course modern Iran, this was they believed in a form of dualism. Yin-yang type stuff, good and evil, black-white. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you don't know much about religion, I mean, to this day, just walk up and talk to a surfer. They got the yin-yang. Can't you tell? There's day and there's night. There's cold and there's heat. There's black and white. There's evil and good. So this dualistic heresy denies, ultimately, the humanity of Jesus and reappears in different forms in different religions later on. Consisted of Zoroastrianism, you've heard of that, talk about that in world religions class, that type of dualism, Babylonian folklore, Buddhist ethics, or Buddhistic ethics, and also have superficial additions mixed with Christian elements, but you can't have a Christian faith apart from Christ himself, okay? If you're going to talk about Jesus was a egocentric, messianic maniac riding around on a donkey, just bless everybody, turn the other cheek, that's not the Christ we have in Scripture. He made some radical claims to divinity and proved them with miracles, exorcisms, and other forms of miracles. Yeah, including raising himself from the dead. Yes?
I didn't read the full article, just the headline, but there was a recent discovery of another artifact that is
The temple?
there's a historian that was, at the time, that was documenting an eyewitness account of Jesus performing a miracle, bringing a baby, resuscitating a baby, bringing a baby back to life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how legit it is, but that's
I don't either. I've read that story or heard about that story. How legit, or if we can authenticate it, I don't know.
Well, the Bible said that there's nothing, the volumes of the world can't hold what he did.
Sure, sure. That's a metaphor too. You remember
What
that?
do you mean? It's a metaphor.
Well, let's put it this way. When it says he did so many things that the books of the world couldn't contain, what do we call that in logic?
Hyperbole?
Hyperbole. It would be like saying he committed an infinite number of resurrections.
Or everybody in the world.
He walked on water and ice skated on the rings of Saturn.
That
you know?
was his idea.
All I'm saying is he did a lot more things
things.
than what we have recorded in the New Testament. And that's also a thing you want to share with kids. You know, when they go, how come the Bible doesn't talk about how whales operate? You know, the Bible is not a book on biology, geography, geology, astrophysics. It seeks to tell a story. Created the world, Garden of Eden, man blew it. From that moment on, you have a love story of restoration. It's all you need to know about salvation. Now, if you believe in natural theology, grounded in a designer, the world around you will become more interesting. Now you can talk about flowers and biology and zoology and all this other stuff and educate your kids in the designer ID type of direction. At least that's what I do. If not, I go against my own conscience because nothing else makes sense. All right, so as the theory of two eternal principles, good and evil, here we go. This is really the same Gnostic core you see in other heretical movements. Good and evil is predominant in the fusion of ideas and gives color to the whole. Manichaeism is a form of religious dualism. Now, when we say, well, I'm a dualist because I believe in two natures, it's not philosophical dualism as we see back in the day. All right? Now you can say, well, I'm a trichotomist. I believe in three natures. That we have three natures. I have not just a soul and a body, but I have a spirit. Right? But when the scripture says, worship the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, well, we could make a different, obviously, that which is immaterial, you can make a distinction between body and immateriality, which is spirit or soul. But once people start saying things like, well, I think that there's three parts to man, I always take a few steps back, because if you're going to make a distinction between soul and mind, and just tell me that the mind is sort of the seat of the soul, well, what are you talking about? What is your reference point? How could you say that? You know, what is a soul? That which is non-physical, all right? Right? We talked about this before in some other class, I think. But to explain to me non-materiality, God is spirit, He does this. You can't see the wind, but you can feel it. Yeah, okay, well that's still it's an analogy, but all analogies have a breaking point. That's the best way I can communicate with my son, you know? He says, how could God be everywhere? Well, the wind is everywhere, in that sense. There's oxygen everywhere, at least up here, right?
Gravity.
So, Gravity? Yeah, same thing. At least within our closed system, if you believe in a closed system. I'm talking about within planet Earth. But nonetheless, at least we can say we have two natures, right? There's the nature that won't die, right? And then there's the resurrected body. The body that will face decay and will one day be physically resurrected from the dead, reunited with your soul, unless you believe that God is making a completely new body and throw your soul into that body. I believe in the same exact body, just resurrected from the dead to perfection, because it's His job. All right, so St. Augustine, like I mentioned, before his conversion was a part of this cult. This cult or cultic ideas stemming from this movement spread as far as Africa, Spain, France, northern Italy, to India and China.